So here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome, one and all, to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some dialogue about what is going on in the world today, taking a look at some clips from the news, and having a little bit of discussion. Of course, you can find the live portion on YouTube Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Coffee Talk and Prepper University, and that's at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University. You can also find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Coffee Talk Chat is where I am there, as well as fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon as we get ready to jump off here. And of course, I do read, as many of you know, through as many of the comments as I can, so that those of you who are listening and not able to see can keep up with the conversation. And I'll go ahead and say hello to some of them now. Helter is here, as well as Puck, Dragon, Ragnar, Cyberjack Sr. is here from Maryland, and being joined by a single feline today. Some of you who are able to see, you might notice Little Girl sleeping in the chair behind me. Little girl is sleeping in the chair. Yes, she's still here, not adopted yet. And Land of Liberty is here in a secret bunker in rural Missouri. It's a good place to be. Double secret location on double secret probation, as it were, as we get ready to dive into the world of the ridiculous. And that is, of course, what's going on in our world. And it is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I see Turk is here, as well as New York Patriot. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for popping in. And Cyberjack Sr. says that's a professional bookend kitty. Yeah, well, sometimes. No, she's a good girl. She really is. As we get ready here to see what's going on in the world. And we're going to start off with everyone's favorite uncle, dear old, sweet old, lovable old, reliable old, transparent old, focused, sharp as a tack, Uncle Joe, right on point. And Raccoon has joined us as well. Uncle Joe's in the news again. And why is that? Because he's finally decided to do something about the border crisis. USA Today article, Biden finally acts on the border crisis, showing that he could have done something about it all along. Yes, we all knew that. We all knew that because he's the one that started it in the first place. We've talked about it 100 times if we talked about it once. On the first day in office, he signed an executive order hindering Border Patrol from detaining people. They couldn't repatriate them anymore. They had to let everybody in, including so-called special interest aliens. It would have to be a special interest alien, of course, for those of you who are not aware, is an alien or illegal alien, as it were, not an extraterrestrial alien. Those only land in Nevada. But an illegal alien who has some kind of a criminal status, including being on a terrorist watch. Close to 100,000 of them have been let across the border since that order was signed, that we are aware of. They're in here. They're in here doing God knows what. So here we go. On to the article. After watching illegals crossing at the U.S.-Mexico border explode throughout his presidency, President Joe Biden has finally decided it's time to act. Nearly 4 years into his term, it feels more than a little late. Apparently, Biden can no longer ignore the polls. Biden has hemmed and hawed for years that he's helpless to slow down border encounter, more than doubled during his tenure, and that he's reliant on Congress to help out. It's much more than doubled. And I'm kind of surprised even to see USA Today doing an article like this, because they usually kiss his ass. Okay. They've become very left-leaning. But it's much more than just doubled. It's nearly 10 times the number of encounters. Back to the article, that was always untrue in his first day in office. After all, Biden used his executive authority to end Trump administration policies like remain in Mexico, quotes, that were helpful in curbing asylum claims that have overwhelmed our border. Biden simply chose to ignore the problem. Plus, he didn't want to pick fights with progressives in his own party who'd rather there not be any limits on the border. That strategy has spectacularly. Biden's tanking poll numbers are due in no small part to his mismanagement of illegal immigration. I don't trust polls. Those of you who have been longtime listeners, you know I often will attack a poll, because you can't tell me that you cherry-picked 500 people to interview and those responses from those 500 people are supposed to represent the entire United States. 78% of Americans think this, and you talk to 512 people. No, that's bullshit. But that's how polls work. So back to the article. Immigration, along with the economy and inflation, has soared to one of the top issues on voters' minds as we head towards the presidential election. It's not just a border problem anymore, as cities, often large Democratic ones like Chicago and New York, are dealing with an influx of migrants. Yeah, and now he wants to do something about it. As the article suggests, too little, too late. Too little, too late. Back to some of the comments really quickly here. I see Sven is here. New York Patriot wants us to keep Joe. Okay. And Lantern of Liberty says it's almost as if it's election year. I see. Yeah, well, it is. And Puck says special interest alien like military age Chinese males. Well, yes and no. Again, special interest are aliens that you can identify that, yes, they are from a criminal element, or yes, they might have links to terrorism, not just military age men. It goes beyond that. And when we read the article about that in October, at that point, some 74, 75,000 had already crossed the border. And Monkey is here. New York Patriot says now he also wants to release more oil from the reserves to lower the prices, all in time for an election year. Yeah, and that's another bad idea. As many of you are probably aware, the purpose behind the oil reserves is for the military, for emergencies. More specifically, the Air Force would have dibs on oil reserves in times of war to help to protect the U.S. borders from aerial attacks, missile attacks, invasions, so on and so forth. And Puck says Biden's handlers have to go through the motions of doing something to provide cover for the election fraud that will surely happen in November. And Nature Nerd says China is gaining lots of influence in China by moving their factories there to avoid Biden's tariffs, then sending thousands of commies to our southern border. Unbelievable. And Lantern says in statistics class a long time ago, yeah, because they don't do that in high school anymore, do they? I was taught that anything less than 5,000 is statistically invalid. Well, if you've watched any of the previous podcasts where I've pulled one of those polls apart, because I do that occasionally, the majority of them are interviews with less than 1,000 people. And again, they handpick them, they cherry pick them. I'm sure some of you have tried to do like a survey on your phone or something like that, and suddenly you get kicked out and they tell you the survey's full. That's because you answered the wrong question and they don't want you. I used to work for a polling service in the early 90s, back before we had all the technology, and it was harder to fake it then. but they did fake it. It's one of the things I didn't like about it. Oh, we need to do a survey with there has to be a certain number of women. Well, we'll just mark off as women in these polls. They would just change and switch all kinds of shit around. They're paid to find a specific answer, not to honestly seek it out. Monkey says that they learned that Trump charges are Class E in New York, which is the lowest class of felony. Rarely do people go to jail on Class E felony charges in New York, and it shouldn't be a felony anyways. We've run that over pretty good in the last few days, or since those since those charges came through. Firstly, he shouldn't have been charged at all. It shouldn't have even gone to court, but it should have been misdemeanors. And the only way you can turn those misdemeanors into a felony is if you can prove that they were done, that they were committed in order to set yourself up to commit an even bigger crime. And I'm like, where's that crime? What is it? What is that crime? Well, they can't tell you. So why are they felonies? They shouldn't be. They shouldn't have been misdemeanors either, because it never should have got to court. It never should have got to court. And New York is here. Thanks for joining us today. But, we're not done with Biden yet. You may have seen he had a big Time magazine interview, and he made an ass out of himself. He made a huge ass out of himself. And Sven says there's no specific felony charge. This has never happened before in America. Yeah, a point I've made over and over, that this is completely unprecedented. It's completely unprecedented. It absolutely looks like a weaponized justice system where they just made shit up to force the issue, which is what the DA ran on when he ran for district attorney and pledged that he would do this. He would find a way to make it work, and that's how he won, because the lawmakers made sure he got into that position so that he could chase down that situation with Trump and force it to work. Force it to work. Monkey says, yeah, the charge is a bullshit judgment off of pure emotions and hatred for Trump. But as I had promised, we're not quite done with Biden yet. Interview. This is a Fox News article. Biden says he's more physically viable than the Time reporters that were interviewing him, quoting that he can take them. Biden basically says that he could take them in a fight. He was hostile in this interview and argumentative. Watch it if you have time. He's an angry, bitter old dude. He reminds me of some of the people that I used to have to deal with when I worked in the mental health clinic. So President Biden said he was more physically able to do the job of the presidency than anyone, appearing to joke in a new interview that he could beat up reporters who asked about his advanced age. Biden sat down with Time magazine at the White House last month for a lengthy interview published on Tuesday. At one point, Biden was asked if he could still do the job, quote, as an 85-year-old man who will be considered too old to lead by many Americans if he were to win a second term. Quote from Biden, I can do it better than anyone you know. You're looking at me. I can take you too, Biden told Time, including Washington bureau chief Massimo Calabrese and editor-in-chief Sam Jacobs. Biden, who was presumably joking, said he never considered not running again because of his age and offered a message for Americans who are worried about it. Now, they say they're presuming he's joking. That's what the White House press has told them he was doing. I don't know that he was joking. I'm thinking back to when he was running for president, and it was the the Auto Workers Union, the famous soundbite where he's yelling at the guy, I don't work for you, I don't work for you. Listen to the rest of the soundbite. He tells the guy to step outside. He was like, let's take this outside. You want to step outside? Like he's going to fight the guy. Mister, I can't stay on a bicycle. Article goes on to say, and this is another quote, watch me, look, name me a president that's gotten as much done as I've gotten done in my first 3.5 years. When all of you write in Time magazine, I couldn't get any of it done. When you told me there's no pay, no way, he could get $1 trillion+ bill done in terms of to deal with infrastructure. And I'm not screwing this up on purpose. This is how he said it. Okay. Where there's no way he gets $368 billion for dealing with the environment, where there's no way I could get the legislation passed on, Biden said. He was blithering all over the place. I remember when I was heading to to South Korea to reclaim the chips industry, that we had gotten $865 billion in private sector investment since I've been in. He continues. Name me a president who's done that. No, nobody's run us down faster than you, Joe. I'll give you that. Time, however, fact-checked his comments, noting the White House announced an $866 billion private sector investment in May, not when Biden went to South Korea in 2022. The funding was also meant for initiatives across clean energy and manufacturing industry, and it's not limited to chips, and that is microchips industry. So he got the two things mixed up, and he got the timeline mixed up. Questions about Biden's age and mental acuity have dogged him his entire presidency, and there was a significant exhalation over concerns about his re-election chances following the report earlier this year by counsel Robert Hur about Biden's possession of classified documents. Blah, blah, blah. But again, if you haven't seen that interview, it's interesting because he's angry. He is angry. He didn't get his pills this morning. Or he didn't get his pills that day, perhaps I should say. Let me catch up a couple of comments here because I'm way behind. New York Patriot says they changed the law this year in New York to circumvent the statutes of limitations in New York, which allowed the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit to go through. And then Turk says that aggression is a symptom of Alzheimer's. Yeah, because you feel like everybody's challenging you all the time. And you don't want to be wrong, or you don't want to admit that you did something wrong or that you're forgetful. So you lash out at people. You lash out. New York Patriot says it allowed them to charge him, back to the other point, with misdemeanors and elevated to felonies. At the end of the year, it reverts back to the old standard. Yeah, very, very shady. Helter reminds us Biden can't even take the stairs. And Puck says, thankfully, Biden isn't calling the shots. He's just a figurehead. Well, this is just as bad. It doesn't matter if he's the one calling the shots or not. Shots are being called, and they're bad ones. And they're causing a lot of damage. Dragon says we should see Biden take an MMA fight in the cage match. Celebrity death match. Isn't that what they used to do on MTV? Celebrity death match. And Zane is here. Thanks for joining us today as I try to catch up here, as well as Fluke Man and Arnicky from rural Minnesota. Almost ready. But it doesn't end with that. It doesn't end with that. Because he also he blames Trump for the border. And that he couldn't do it in time, takes no responsibility for what happened on the border. Still trying to put it off on that he needs help from Congress. Sign this bill and we can get the border fixed. My hands are tied. That's a lie. That's a lie. He's the one that started the problem. Of course, that's the method that's used by many lawmakers. I'll create a problem and then I'll pretend to fix it. But it's too little too late. The damage has been done. It's going to take a lot of time, money, and effort to undo what's been done to us. And again, it's not just the United States. This has happened all across the Western world, unfortunately, with this influx of migration just unraveling our societies, diluting our culture, and stripping away our tax funds. Chris says that Biden's always confrontational. Sure looks that way, doesn't it? Because he gets mad pretty quick. And Fluke Man says the only reason Biden's in office is because he's controllable. If it was Trump with dementia, he would have 25th amended. It's the 25th, isn't it? I think that might be right. As we shift around here. But that was his interview with Time. It's bizarre, to say the least, his interview with Time magazine. But, you know, we're going to bounce to the environment here in a minute. So another one of my pet peeves is environmental lies. clean energy lies, and recycling lies. Recycling lies. And many of you probably have seen the many of you have probably seen the video that I've already done on Coffee Talk about plastic recycling and how basically they've been lying to us for damn near 50 years. 50 years, because plastic really can't be recycled. The majority of it that goes even to recycling plants is shredded and put in landfill. Most plastic that's used in consumer goods, there's hundreds of different types of plastic, but there's something like 7 base types that are used for consumer goods, including food storage. And the majority of them can only be recycled maximum once, one time. And they become too degraded, that is, their bonding starts to come undone, and they become toxic. They become toxic. But billions and billions of dollars in taxpayer funds have been wasted in these recycling programs. And like I said, I did a whole video on it. I did a video on it like a week ago on Coffee Talk, independently, of course, from the podcast. I'm sure dozens of people have seen it. I'm sure dozens of people have seen it, because the channel is oppressed by the powers that be, so they don't circulate my videos very easily. But this just ties in with that, and this is important to consider. This is an LA Times article. Researchers discover thousands of nanoplastic bits in bottles of drinking water. No shit. It seems anywhere scientists look for plastic, they will find it. From the ice in Antarctica to the first bowel movement produced by newborn babies, now researchers are finding that the amount of microplastics floating in bottled drinking water is far greater than initially believed. Using sophisticated imaging technology, scientists at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Laboratory examined water samples from 3 popular brands and found hundreds of thousands of bits of plastic per liter of water. 90% of those plastics were small enough to qualify as nanoplastics, microplastic flecks, so small they can be absorbed into human cells and tissue, as well as cross the blood-brain barrier. The research, which was published Monday in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, raises new concerns about the potentially harmful health effects and prevalence of nanoplastics. The researchers found that the quality of such particles was 10 to 100 times greater than previously, or quantity, again, I flubbed. Quantity of such particles was 10 to 100 times greater than previously estimated. Quote, for a long time before this study, I actually thought that what was inside bottled water in terms of nanoplastics was just a few hundred PET particles, said Maxine Quine, a Columbia chemistry graduate student and the study's lead author. It turned out to be much more than that. PET, or polyethylene terephthalate, is a type of clear plastic that is commonly used for single-use water bottles. Catch that phrasing. Single-use water bottles. Why? Because they can't be recycled. And they can't be recycled because it's the cheapest grade of plastic. It's paper thin. Microplastics, particles that range from 1 micrometer to 5 millimeters in size, have been documented in bottle and tap water for several years, but the identification of nanoplastics, particles that measure just billionths of a meter, is raising alarms. The incredibly small size of nanoparticles allow them to behave differently than larger pieces of matter, said Bison Yan, a Columbia environmental chemist and co-author in the study. Pollutants and pathogens can be carried on the surface of a particle, and the smaller a particle gets, the larger its surface area to volume ratio becomes. As a result, even if they're not that toxic at a larger particle size, when they become smaller, they become toxic because they can interfere with cells in the tissues inside of the organelles. Research on the effect of plastic on human health is still in its infancy. It's only been recently that scientists have identified the presence of plastic in people's bodies and organs. But again, an industry we've been lied to about for decades because we gave up safety or quality for quantity. We gave up quality for quantity, basically. And Chillin Davis here. Glad you could make it today. Thanks for dropping in. The glass industry in the 70s had an advertising campaign I've talked about before, but the glass industry warned us then, warned people in the 1970s about the dangers of using plastic because they didn't want to lose their industry. And that was what they ran on. Glass is cleaner. It's safer for your health. It's easier to recycle because you melt down the glass and you make more glass out of it. All it is melted sand, really. So it's clean. It's clean, it's safe, it's easy to sanitize, so on and so forth. Plastic offered an inexpensive alternative that was lighter and easier to transport. It doesn't weigh as much. It doesn't break as easily. So we gave up quality for quantity where plastic was concerned, and now we're mired in it. We're mired in this, and it's not safe. The plastic is not safe. That's why even bottled water has an expiration date, because that bottle is slowly decomposing into the water that's inside of it to a point where it could be unsafe to drink. The industry knows this. The government knows this. Activists know this. The ones in the upper echelon of activism know this. These companies know this. But they've been lying to us, and that's what my video was about then. They've been lying to us for decades, since the 1970s, 50 years. Recycle plastic, save the planet. And you can't recycle the shit. It really doesn't work. And they still push this. Pepsi is blowing their horn about using recycled bottles and stuff now. We're recycling, we're saving the planet. You're killing us. How long before we start having birth defects attributed to this, if we're not already? Because they're only just getting around to finding this and exposing it. And how are you going to reverse the effects of it at this point, at this stage? You've been feeding this to people for 50 years. How are you going to reverse this now? And then, part of the problem also is the type of plastic that's being used. Because plastic is made from oil, but you can make it from any kind of oil. It doesn't have to be a petroleum-based plastic. I'm sure some of you have heard that they can make plastic out of corn, because you can make plastic from oil that came from plants. Corn is cheap. You could make plastic out of corn. And it's not the same as petroleum-based products. Decomposes fairly quickly too, by comparison, which is why they don't want to use it, because if it's sitting around long enough, it'll, you've got a bottle of water made out of corn plastic. Eventually the water will leak through it after a year or two, however long. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Nature Nerd says there's always a material like plastic that is too good to be true, so we use it in everything, and then when the shit hits the fan later, we ban it. Yeah, I don't know that it's going to get banned anytime soon. Turk says this is a tree-hugging virtue signal society thinking they can bring major corporations to heel, refusing to admit corporations shouldn't even exist because if corps go away, Gibbs does, or the money does too. And Hugo says plastics are thrown away so fast and are making us sick. The blame is being pushed on the consumers and not the producers. And Turk says clowns actually complain glass bottles aren't biodegradable. Seriously. Yeah, you can melt it. It's, again, all it is melted sand in the first place. It's pretty easy to make. Again, it's easy to break, and it's heavy. And that was the takeaway. And they said, oh, this is lighter. It costs less to make than producing glass. And it doesn't break as easily. So screw glass. And as I pointed out, the glass industry in the 70s, to save their own jobs, really, we're like, hey, man, don't trust this plastic stuff. Take it easy. Well, there you go. Dragon says they won't stop making it since plastic is cheap to produce. They'll continue to keep the lie up that it's recyclable. That's correct. And Chillin says maybe that's why what fried my brain, could be why I still live in Massachusetts. And Turk says that corn plastic, bamboo plastic, soy plastic. Yeah, because you can make it out of any kind of, you can make it out of any oil product. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a chemical. It doesn't have to be petroleum based. It can be naturally based. It can be naturally based. And that's the problem. Zane says even burning plastic is terrible for the environment because some of those particles just float in the air and land anywhere. New York Patriot says, remember when Chinese food came in cardboard cartons? Now it's all plastic containers. Yeah, or the styrofoam. And the styrofoam is also plastic and also can't be recycled. You're not supposed to recycle the styrofoam. So they separate it into the 7 basic categories, or 8, because one category would be other at these plastic recycling facilities. They separate them into 8 different categories. 7 of them are for consumer use, and 8 is miscellaneous because there's hundreds of different kinds of plastic. And then they've got to determine which of them can be recycled or not. And then, like I said, they shred it and put it in a landfill anyway. So what's the point? What is the point? It's a waste of time. And we're paying for it. We're paying because in order to push this, in order to push that entire narrative, we're paying billions in taxpayer dollars. Billions in taxpayer dollars to force that narrative through. Wasted money on something that can't work. Doesn't work. Chillin wants us to hit the like button. Please do if you don't mind, whether you're on Coffee Talk or Prepper University. Please do hit the like button. And Brian has joined us. He said he forgot his late note. You have a note from your parents for being late to class? Shame on you. We're going to jump to California here. Going to be an article from the Mirror. An article from the Mirror. I'll read one more here. Leela says they remember when they had soda in glass bottles. They almost overnight every day. Every soda was in plastic. The stores refused to take glass bottles back as refunds. Then the plastic bottles spread everywhere. And I remember that. I'm old enough to remember when all of that stuff came in glass. Peanut butter Actually, I remember when peanut butter came in pails. They used to put them in pails, metal pails, that came with a shovel attached on a little strap so that you could use it as a sandbox toy afterwards. And I remember when soda, even 2-liter bottles, came in glass, and it had like a styrofoam wrap on the outside. So back again, California, the Mirror. Let me see if I can pause that there. Grim footage shows reality of California's shantytown as wooden houses spring up along the road. I'm trying to stop this here so that you can watch the video clip. It says shantytown in California has been exposed. Grim footage which shows houses made with wood and tarps lining the sides of streets. Squalid conditions were seen in a video showing the sudden appearance of properties in Oakland where service roads and main roads were blocked off by the makeshift homes. Footage shows trash covering the floor around the premises of homes made of wood, tarps, and discarded materials. Some viewers of the absolutely mind-boggling clip also noted the makeshift dwellings spread across the Bay City area. Now let me wind this back here so that I can show this clip to you real quick. I don't know if there's audio or not. Yeah, okay.
Hooverville.
All right. I don't know who filmed this, so I can't credit it, but I'm going to go ahead and play this for you here really quickly. For those of you who can see. Here it comes.
Blows my mind. This is a little shanty town. Check this out. They built houses. Straight up houses. Look at all this. This is absolutely mind-boggling. It's insane. They just allow this. It's Hooverville. Look, you got burnt out cars all over the place. There was a burnt out RV down this road yesterday. Yep, still there.
To take a slight right turn onto 23rd Avenue.
Oakland isn't real.
I'm sorry, buddy. Oakland is real. It goes on to say Michelle Oxford, the host of Cali Based, posted the video. Okay, that's who did it. The video and was stunned by the state of the area. He captioned the video, "Parts of Oakland are worse than a third world country. They just allow people to live in absolute squalor wherever they choose." It continues. This looks like Hooverville during the Great Depression. Welcome to Oakland's very own Gavinville. I'm surprised he even knew what Hooverville was. I'm surprised anybody knows what Hooverville was. I'm kind of surprised. But yeah, it's a complete shantytown. A complete functioning shantytown.
This is absolutely mind-boggling.
It's all wooden structures. It's all wooden structures. Pallets and tarps and pieces of wood like 4x8s, flooring that are all just kind of thrown together, but it's an entire neighborhood all along the side of the road and loaded with garbage. There's trash everywhere. Jane says, well, maybe send to Detroit, Michigan immigrants the city back up. Okay. Dragon says, when I was a kid back in the 80s, people used to talk about Mexicans living in cardboard boxes in Tijuana. I've been all over Mexico since then and never saw anyone living in a cardboard box. Well, you were on the wrong side of the border. Obviously, that's happening in America. And Jane says, I heard one time in New York they were going to set up tents in Central Park. I didn't hear that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Nature Nerd says America's slums are looking like India and Africa's slums. I mean, I've seen images of stuff like this in South America, you know, like in certain areas of Brazil and places like that, and Haiti and stuff like that, where people just take whatever raw materials they can find and build a box and live. And that's happening in Oakland right now and other parts of California. And every once in a while, a video like this circulates and everybody in the media acts surprised by this, but it's been going on for quite a while and it's getting worse all the time. Puck says it looks like New Delhi suburbs. And Jane says looks like parts of other countries. Yeah. Random Blip says consequence of what the liberal Democrats have voted for. Absolutely. But that's hard to see. Can you imagine having to live in these neighborhoods? What that would be like? And no, I don't think that's a rainbow flag in that one image. I think that's actually a parachute that they've got stretched over the top of that structure. It's incredible. It's incredible, and nothing is done about it. Nothing is done about it. But the policies of how things are governed in California have led to this. And I'll throw it out there again. Maybe somebody new is listening. I really believe that the lawmakers in California are deliberately sabotaging the state to make it worthless so that the land can be sold for pennies on the dollar to these billionaires that are trying to build their so-called utopian cities in California. There's several projects like that going on right now. They're micro utopias. They're 15-minute cities that these tech billionaires from Silicon Valley are buying up land at 10 cents on the dollar or less because it's worthless now, because it all looks like this. Because it looks like a shanty town in Haiti or Brazil or someplace else third world that you would never imagine finding in the United States. I think they're doing it on purpose. I think there's some shady behind the doors deal going on with those lawmakers where they're getting some kind of kickback, some kind of secret payment. Zane says he has tent cities near him. Nature Nerd says, what happened to litter fines in California? Don't Democrats care about the environment and keeping things clean? How are you going to find these people? How are you going to find them? There's no way for them to pay it. They'd eventually end up in jail, and then they'd still be a burden on taxpayers. And Chillin says he's prepping for mass destruction. Raccoon says, of course, they did it in Lahaina, Hawaii. Oh, I mean, just deliberately sabotaging things. But I think they're sabotaging. I think the lawmakers in California sabotaging the state. I think they're doing it in New York. I think it's more obvious there than anywhere else. And Sven says we're a third world country judiciously and practically. It's starting to look that way, isn't it? As things like this happen more and more. We're finding more of this wherever we are around the United States, and usually close to major cities. Usually close to major cities and places where they used to have money. That's a shame to see. It's a shame to see the destruction of a society going on like that. Puck reminds us 11 out of 10 illegals vote Democrat. Yep. That's right. That's right. Federal Appeals Court. There's a Federal Appeals Court situation that went down that I thought was very interesting, where the Fearless Fund has gotten into trouble. The Fearless Fund. And for those of you who are not aware of what the Fearless Fund is, the Fearless Fund is a grant where the money only goes to Black women. But they've gotten themselves into a lot of trouble. New York Patriot says they were in Long Beach 3 years ago. People were cool, but every beach I went to in California was littered in garbage, both on the beach and on the shorelines. And that's a sad thing to see. Sad thing to see how far things have fallen in such a short time. Really, such a short time. CNN article, Federal Appeals Court blocks the Fearless Fund from issuing grants to only Black women. And that's the co-founder in the image, for those of you who can see, Arian Simone and Ayanna Parsons. Wow, she looks fake. It's the makeup. That's a lot of foundation. That's a lot of foundation. Anyway, article reads, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit has blocked a Black-owned venture capitalist firm from awarding grants exclusively to Black women entrepreneurs. In an opinion released Monday, the judges ruled that the Fearless Fund's Fearless Strivers Grant Contest is, quote, substantially likely to violate the provisions of Title 42 of the U.S. Code, which ensures equal rights under the law and prohibits the use of race when awarding and enforcing contracts. In the ruling, the appellate court ordered a federal court in Georgia to enter a preliminary injunction blocking the fund from closing its grant application process while the case continues to be litigated. It also states the fund's program is unlikely to be protected by the First Amendment. The court's decision marks a victory for anti-affirmative action legal strategist Edward Blum, who filed a lawsuit last August against the fund on behalf of his group, American Alliance for Equal Rights. AAER attorneys have argued that the members who were unnamed in the lawsuit were excluded from the grant program because they weren't Black and that they faced additional harm from the illegal act of racial discrimination. And this is another like too little too late kind of a situation, because this sort of thing's been going on for decades, where there are certain things that have been awarded under affirmative action, pushed through, forced through, that gave an unfair advantage. And now they want to start walking it back. Now they want to start walking it back. And this is the first legal example I've seen of that actually happening. Jane says, wow, why block the fund for American women of color when giving immigrants $2,000 for 2 years in an apartment? What a mess. Yeah, and that's another point there too. That's another point there too. It's a different argument, but I get your point, Jane. That's what they're fighting about, because not enough people are challenging the illegal immigrants. Not enough people are fighting it back. The lawmakers are pushing for the situation with the illegal immigrants, or as I like to call it, the migrant industrial complex. Migrant industrial complex. Because it's billions. It's billions of dollars. These were no bid contracts. No bid contracts that went out for all of these things, for sheltering migrants, for feeding them, clothing them, offering medical, whatever they gave to these people when they showed up in these sanctuary cities. There was no bid contracts, which is practically unheard of unless there's an emergency. Like, let's say a tornado were to come through this neighborhood and the mayor offered a no bid contract for cleanup because it has to be done right now. They didn't need to no bid contract providing shelter or catering or anything else. And the people that are getting it sure as hell don't appreciate it either. Nature Nerd says business ventures should be able to find whoever they want. We all know that immigrants work together to support businesses from their country of origin also. I just thought this was an interesting story because, again, this is the first time I'm seeing this where they're sitting there and saying, you know what, it is discrimination, no matter what color you are, to single out and say, because most people would make that argument, hey, if I were to put out grants for white women only, they'd set my house on fire. I'd never hear the end of it. I'd never work again. I'd be ostracized from everything. But it's okay if they do it. Apparently not. Not anymore. Not anymore. So that sets an interesting precedence now that they've been called on it. They've been called on it. And it's one of the few examples I've seen of getting called on it. And speaking of getting called on things, and speaking of corrupt diversity hires, I know we weren't talking about diversity hires, but we're going to, because we're going to jump to Illinois, to super mayor in the news again. Super mayor in the news again, and you know who I'm talking about, don't you? Tiffany Henyard. Is it Henyard or Henyard? I've heard it pronounced both ways. I'll just say Henyard. Fox News article, Illinois meeting probing super mayor Tiffany Henyard. Lavish spending devolves into chaos. devolves into chaos.
Investigation. Henyard to be.
And it's acting up. A meeting that involved addressing allegations of corruption and lavish spending against scandal-ridden Super Mayor Tiffany Henyard descended into chaos on Monday as her opponents and supporters clashed in Dolton, Illinois. She has supporters?
Be arrested.
How the hell did that happen?
Accusing her of corruption.
How the hell does she have supporters? That's incredible. The scuffle in the small town south of Chicago took place after Dolton trustees voted 4-2 to reinstate former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot to investigate Henyard, who had been accused of using village funds as her own piggy bank, billing taxpayers thousands of dollars for her hair and makeup team, as well as going on lavish trips to Las Vegas. Police had to break up the altercation, which almost came to blows as Henyard and the trustees cleared the room. The town has previously hired Lightfoot to look into Henyard, but the Dolton mayor, who previously insisted that God chose me, quote, vetoed the move. Henyard also previously vetoed the board's request to launch a federal investigation into gathering information on her alleged spending and finance mismanagement. And this is what's really interesting about what's going on down here. So the city council knows that she's being shady. They've voted to have her investigated. They voted to have her books opened. They've voted to have federal investigations done. They hired Lori Lightfoot, which is a joke. They're paying Lori Lightfoot $400 an hour, by the way. Hired Lori Lightfoot, who is about as bad as Henyard, but maybe not as obvious. And every time they make a vote on something, she vetoes it, and they're screwed. Because law. It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious the way things
You're
have been going
down. You're not going to understand until they put those cuffs on you. You're not going to understand it. You don't care. But baby, they on to you. You guys are following fiction, a made-up story. It is a smear campaign going on right now.
Boy, this is still going on. Henyard is accused.
Yeah. They This is incredible. Quote, you guys are following a fiction, a made-up story, Henyard said into her golden microphone. She has a gold microphone, by the way. That is true. Lightfoot has continued to work on the investigation, though she has yet to receive payment for her work, according to NBC Chicago. Her investigation is expected to be completed in 60 days, the outlet reports. Lightfoot was initially expected to be paid $400 per hour, but Henyard previously said she would not be paid. $400 an hour for 60 days, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Shit. That's some big money. That's big money. And Chillin says he's got to run. Well, we're glad you could make it today. And Zane says unchecked power. And did someone really use the mandate of heaven as a justification? Yes, she did do that. She did do that, as well as the district attorney of Fulton County, who says that Jesus Christ sent her to do her job. As we move around, Helter says, strange that the government of Illinois is not freezing her access to taxpayer funds. No, it just continues to happen, which is why all of this drama has been going on. And it's not a big town, but she's put them in the red. They were in the black. They put her in the red, or she put them in the red. She has been shown, demonstrated to be spending the money on herself, wasting taxpayer funds. And the community's in an uproar. And they had a fight at this last town meeting. It erupted in violence. The police had to break up. And I'm like, who the hell's supporting this woman? Who's supporting her? What supporters could she possibly have? It's obvious what she's doing. Obvious what she's doing. Flukeman thinks that Lightfoot will find her not guilty. No difference to an organization that has investigated themselves after a complaint or an incident put someone in the hospital. Incredible. And I'm just shocked at how much Lori Lightfoot is getting paid. $400 an hour. Think about that. $400 an hour. 8 hours a day. You know, that's $3,200 a day. $3,200 per day. Oh my God. You know, most people don't make that in a week. There are people who don't make that in a month. I dare say most people, your average working stiff doesn't make that much a month. 60 days. For 60 days, Lightfoot is going to do this investigation. And then Henyard will veto her payment. And then she'll sue and probably win. Jane wants to know, is she an attorney or a politician? Henyard or Lori Lightfoot? Because Lori Lightfoot was the former mayor of Chicago, and Henyard is the current mayor of Dalton in Illinois. And Puck says top-notch lawyers could fetch that, but Lightfoot is not a top-notch anything. I don't know. Is she an attorney, or was she? I'm not sure. But that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for her to basically do nothing. And Lori Lightfoot she may not have been openly as corrupt, but she was not a good mayor, and she ran Chicago down as fast as anyone else. She was just as destructive to the community in Chicago, in Illinois, following through the legacy of previous mayors who ran Chicago down, and the current mayor is running it down. The current mayor is also ruining Chicago, destroying the community, wasting taxpayer funds, increasing taxes, making laws that don't make sense. Zane says when people start using the mandate of heaven, that turns into a slippery slope to monarchy. And Puck wants to know if Fani hired Nathan for about that much. Probably, because he made estimates are as much as 1.5 or 1.6 million now for nothing. He had 2 meetings that they're aware of, which is why she's still under investigation. Whether or not they do anything about it remains to be seen, because she's not done trying to charge Trump, even though they've postponed the trial again, to my understanding, right? Then they postpone it again. She has, she's won her midterm. She's very likely to be elected again. 90%. That's a landslide. 90% so far for Fani Willis. And she's about as corrupt as it gets. And she's got the full support of the local Atlanta churches, the mega churches, the black mega churches are behind her. On the podium, we read the article a few weeks back. Fire and brimstone. Fani Willis was sent here by God. She's doing Jesus's work. So Jesus wants you to be a fornicator and lead men into adultery and cheat on their wives. They want you to misappropriate funds at work. They want you to hire your boyfriend and pay him $1.5 million for nothing. That's what Jesus would do. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Puck says Georgia needs to get rid of Governor Kemp. Unfortunately, whoever they replace him with would probably be worse. I mean, look at who we've got now. Look at who we've got now as far as lawmakers are concerned in Georgia. It's scary. Look at who our senator is, or both of them. They're terrible. They're terrible. Anyways, with that, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and start signing off. Again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find me at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube for the live portion on Coffee Talk and on Prepper University, as well as X, formerly known as Twitter. You can find me at Coffee Talk Chat, and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta. And so I will again say thank you to everyone who was able to join us here today. Hope you got something out of the conversation.